I think the frustration for a lot of people who've ended up in court is that their inability to be able to talk about their reasons why they have been breaking the law, right? Because clearly they're not people who are necessarily denying that they've blockaded a building, or they've sprayed it with paint or whatever. What they're saying is that there's a justification for doing so. And what judges have been doing has been refusing to hear that. Now, in part, that's because of pressure that's come from, it's actually come from within the senior levels of the judiciary, right? Some of it is just about simple case management. What they're trying to do is to make trials shorter, because that's cheaper. And so they're saying we're not prepared to allow defendants to spend large amounts of the court's time talking about their motivations for why they're committing these acts, which is, of course, in many cases, is the reason why people are going to using the courts in the first place. It's a platform. Right? The tactic is, for those people who engage in civil disobedience, is that they seek arrest in order to be able to raise the profile of the cause, and some of that is going to be in court. I think there has been a great deal of concern that judges have also been threatening people with contempt for pointing out that juries can still make their own decisions, and the pressure that's come from that is in many ways is entirely illogical, because there's nothing wrong with the simple fact that juries can make those decisions. I think maybe the reality is that there is some concern, certainly within the Crown Prosecution Service, that juries will. So whenever you put environmental cases up in front of juries, they have a tendency to be much, much more sympathetic than prosecutors, the Home Secretary, the people who write the commentary pages for the Daily Mail. Right? Because actually I think all those people are entirely out of step with where public opinion is on this. People are genuinely worried about the potential consequences of the climate crisis, and although they may express their frustration with campaigners, there is a degree of sympathy within them as well. Right? The big concern in relation to that ability to be able to provide a justification, for the reasons why you take part in these protests, is that you used to be able to argue that as a defence, and increasingly that has been restricted by the courts. And there was a brief period when at least there needed to be some thinking about how whether the decisions are made were human rights compliant in relation to that. But that's also been shrinking too. The crucial thing is that the consequence of the type of arrests, so it's not just the fact that people are going to court, it's what they're being convicted for. So increasingly, the Crown Prosecution Service is pressing for more serious charges to be brought. The consequences of which is that we had an absolute, there's a record number of people just before Christmas, the end of last year, who were in court in prison awaiting trial, right? More than there have been probably for the best part of 60, 70 years, which is extraordinary if you think about it, given the fact that every single one of those people are part of movements that are avowedly, non-violent. I think part of the motivations for that is to frighten people away from taking part in protests, right? So if you think, not everybody is in a position to be able to face the enormous strain of a protracted court case, a trial, the possibility of going to prison, the possibility of serving a prison sentence in a prison system that's falling apart. But clearly some people are, and those people who perhaps have, less to lose are still willing to face potential consequences of taking those actions, because they see it's a moral choice. People understand that if you don't do something, you don't act, then inaction is not going to keep anybody safe. We're not going to create a harmonious future without doing something, right? So it's still the case that I don't think the government has fully thought through the consequences of the legislation. They think this will stop people from protesting, right? Because that's the, draconian options are the instinctive position of the state. If we frighten people enough, they won't take action. But that assumes that people are just going to forget about the climate crisis or any one of the other causes that people take direct action and civil disobedience. I mean, Palestine, for instance, right? And the amazing stuff that Palestine Action have been doing. Just because you make the consequences tougher is not going to worry everybody, frighten everybody away. And for those people who've got, real problems that they can't engage in some of that more, direct confrontational stuff, there are other things that they can do. Right? That movements are not just made out of those people who go to court. Movements are made by all the other people, all the networks of support that exist. And I think the important thing that we always try to emphasise is if you're looking at all of this and thinking it's not safe for me to be able to go out and protest, or protest is illegal, that comes up a lot, right? It's simply not true. People need to be better informed about their rights when they go out on a protest so they know what to do if they're threatened with arrest. People need to be much better at looking out for each other, and sometimes as movements we've been quite poor at that. We need to get better at it. And because of things like the serious disruption prevention orders, which are going to be built on the gathering of intelligence, we need to be much, much better familiarised with how we resist police surveillance. But we can do that. We can do all of those things. Through doing that, we can ensure that people's rights to better protest continue.